All right. Hello. Again, my name is Fire. I'm recording this probably just about a minute after I finish the video on Angel Fire East, because it is time to talk about the entire series of The Word and the Void. I am, like I said in the last video, and I feel like I haven't gushed enough about this series, but this is definitely one of the best series that Terry Brooks wrote. And honest to goodness, I think it actually might be the actual, best that I've read so far. And the only series I know that is going to have any chance at edging it out is going to be the Genesis of Shannara, which is next up on the docket for reading. But The Word and the Void was absolutely a phenomenal reading experience. Everything from the characters, the settings, the relatability, Terry Brooks' references to everything from Starbucks and Coca-Cola and all that. It brings it kind of I think Pizza Hut's mentioned, all these common brands and companies from the 80s and the 90s really kind of brings things into focus, because it really connects your mind, especially if you're alive, especially alive back then. It kind of brings into your mind exactly what the world looked like then. I could see someone who's only 20 right now, thinking there's cell phones everywhere, and then realizing, oh, there's not. It's only landlines. I bet you they get the wrong mental images, thinking about the phone in the Free Mark residence ringing, and thinking, that's thinking it's a cell phone, and then forgetting that, phones recorded 10 years ago still. Commonly recorded 10, 15 years ago still. Only 10 years ago is when we started really kind of bucking landlines, I feel like. But anyway, but regardless, there's a connectivity, a connective tissue, because it's obviously a fantastical version of our real world. But that connective tissue reminds you that it's supposed to be our world, but with magic in it. And it's great, honestly. It's really great. I like that. I don't know why I like that, because usually I don't like sort of modernish fantasy. Well, that's not entirely true. I also really like Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere too. So, now I think about it, maybe I kind of do like modern fantasy. Not that I've read a lot of it, but it's something I kind of like. Anyway, but in the end though, it's a really, really, really good series. Taken as a whole, it's a good series. All three books are good. Whatever I might protest about Angel Fire East, I still like the book. I still like the book immensely, and I love the two preceding books immensely. There's so much going on here that's just so solid. I feel like I have to kind of come back to something I brought up in the review of Running with the Demon, though, and that is the lack of connective tissue between this series and the Shannara books. Because there's just very little of it. There's very little mention of the Word. There's no mention of the Void in the Shannara books. There's no more Knights of the Word or anything. There's no more Demons of the Void. All that stuff is just completely absent from Shannara. And I always thought it was a weird, neglectful choice by Terry Brooks to not have those elements in his later series, because basically, the conflict between the Word and the Void, the Knights of the Word, and so forth, they're all they're present in the Word and the Void, Genesis of Shannara, and Legends of Shannara, and then after that, all that stuff just kind of disappears. It just stops existing, and I've never understood why. I've never understood why that is. I never, because after this point, he will write 3 more Shannara series. He's going to write, because Genesis and High Druid are written kind of concurrently, or at least published concurrently. And then after that, you have Dark Legacy, Defenders, and Fall. And none of those series ever come back to this tie-in to our world. And I never understood why Terry Brooks didn't do that. It always felt so weird to me that he didn't do that, because it just, It would have made sense. It would have made sense to like make it so that, that like there's like some sort of, like it doesn't have to be like a Sauron Morgothish, threat to the order and stability of the world, right? It doesn't have to be like that. But the idea, that there's like a dark god out there, the void, that is like, that is at least in part, like created maybe the Ildach and so forth. It just would have made a lot of sense, that there's that maybe they're fighting for a little more. And of course this comes from someone who has, who has Christian beliefs and who very much is a big fan of Tolkien's work, which are inherently Christian and have an inherently good versus evil aspect to them. But it's like all that setup is there, and it's never utilized. It feels like the setup is there, but it's not utilized. And because it's there but not utilized, it feels kind of like a waste. Like why do the events of this book exist just for like some, just for like, just to save like what, like maybe like 10,000 people? Because ultimately that's what the events of these three books ultimately result in. It results in saving about 10, maybe 20,000 people, during the apocalypse, and resulting in the world of Shannara eventually. And, it's a little thing that blossoms into a big thing, but, like, there's this whole overarching divine cosmic battle, and I feel like that overarching battle shouldn't just disappear, unless I'm forgetting something from the other books, but I don't think I am. Not only that, but, I feel like there's very little chance that the void would, even if the word would withdraw from the world, I don't see why the void would, unless, like I just, yeah, it feels like lost opportunity, and it's a little frustrating because it feels like there's more there than Terry Brooks wants to write about, but the problem is that because he introduced it, he should write it. He should have written about it. It's much in the same way that I pointed out that the war on the Precandorn, in the High Druid of Shannara, contains all these implications, and there's all these ideas and thoughts and so forth that really should be considered in the telling of that story, of that war, but Terry Brooks completely neglects them, and the end result is that he ends up creating a war that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a silly war that would never pan out the way it did. I feel like you kind of have the same problem here, where it's like, where's the cosmic battle? It should be here because it's bigger than any one person. I think that's just a little bit, I don't know, like you can tell it frustrates me a lot, because when you make a storyline in a universe that's big enough, you have to start considering the implications of the actions and events that occur in it. Because events don't occur in a vacuum. It's the butterfly effect. A butterfly flapping its wings in the deserts of, in the savannas of Africa can cause a hurricane out in the Atlantic. No, theoretically. No, that idea of that is just very, like the idea that one little thing will have ramifications for everything else, or frankly, the fact that everything else could have ramifications on a little thing. It works both ways, and you have to really start thinking about that. Some of my favorite stories, have done, do that. They consider the ramifications of whether it's in video game and the ramifications of your choices in that video game, or it's in, like, say, television shows like Babylon 5. Babylon 5 is a very good example of that sort of thing. Like there's multiple things happening at once, and they affect each other, but they also happen independently of each other. But not no point does the creator, JMS, ever forget that, these events are occurring, But that doesn't take away from the value of these stories on their own. They are such fantastic tales, and it makes me wish that Terry Brooks was like like always wrote at this level, you know? Because even like, you know, even my favorite individual book in the series, The Elfstones of Shannara, doesn't rise to the same, excuse me, it doesn't rise to the same level of character depth and complexity and brain, hello? It doesn't rise to the same level of like character depth and complexity though as these three books. Now, of course, that book was written back in 1980. So, of course, I mean, published in 1980, I should say. So, of course, you know, that's back early in Terry Brooks' career, and he's not as refined and everything. But the thing is that, you know, Terry Brooks starts off weak, gets really strong, and then he gets weak again. And it's like, I just wish there was like, I just wish they were all written like this, because this is, like, I can't tell you enough how much I enjoyed it, how much I enjoyed the characters and everything, and the journeys they go on. You know, I will say that something else that kind of bothers me though in this series is that the more I think about it, the more I realize that the Word is kind of a terrible god. You know, it's a very aloof and absent kind of god. I mean, I guess it's a more traditional god in that sort of way, more of a, you know, in the sense of the Norse gods or the Greek gods or whatever, where they're, you know, where they influence the world and they have their agendas, but they are not there as a presence in people's lives. And I couldn't help but feel like, man, it kind of sucks to be a servant of the Word, you know? Like, you're doing good things and you're there for a good, clearly defined purpose, but it kind of sucks being a servant of the Word, because when you need comfort the most, like in A Night of the Word, you know, it's like you don't get it, you know? You don't receive the comfort, you don't receive the, you know, the kind of reinforcement, frankly, that you would need in that situation. You know, it's just, and it's just kind of, it feels kind of bad, you know, because, you know, when you're a Christian, you know, it's like you look at, you know, you look at the Lord and you look at Jesus and so forth, and, you know, the Lord is your guide and the Lord is your comforter. You know, the Lord is there to support you. And there will be difficult times in life, and there will be challenges, and there will be tragedy, you know. Just look at me, you know, my father passing away 2 years ago. You know, bad things will happen, but the Lord will still be there for you, in small ways and in big ways. And I look at the Night of the Word, I look at the Knights of the Word, I look at John Ross, and I see someone who, yeah, sure, he has his magic, which he can use himself as a practical tool to protect himself and to protect others, but it never feels like he has, like, the kind of, I don't want to say emotional support, because it makes it sound like the Word should be an emotional support dog or something, but he doesn't get, like, you know, he doesn't get the kind of reinforcing and backing up he needs, and at the end of the day, he must give, you know, it's essentially like he has to give up his life to complete his mission. You know, he can't give up the staff and settle down with Josie Jackson and live a normal life for a little while. He gives his pledge, and I mean, bear in mind, there's something honorable and noble in that, you know, and there's, you know, and that should be appreciated in of itself too. You know, the ennobling nature of what John Ross does and John Ross's life and John Ross's pledge as a Knight of the Word. You know, there's something there's good in that choice, and I'm not saying there isn't, but it feels distinctly like the Word feels like an indifferent kind of god, and I guess it kind of bothers me a little bit. Like, it doesn't make me mad necessarily, but it bothers me because it feels like they're, you know, because it's a very indifferent and personal kind of god, and it's just, you know, and in the face of a far more virulent and violent foe in the form of the Void, you know, it feels like that just is like, You know, I mean, of course, there's laws and the laws of the universe and so forth, and maybe there's specific rules and so forth which influence how the Word and the Void interact with the universe. It's just, I kind of feel that little sting in my heart, you know, for someone like John Ross, who's, you know, is kind of stuck in this perpetual losing battle with nothing to go back to, I guess. You know, like nothing to go home to at night, you know. But that's not really a complaint. That's actually just that's not a complaint, by the way. It's not like an opposite complaint about writing or anything. It's just an observation about the overall story. You know, there's nothing really much to add there, truth be told. Because I really can't say anything. You know, whereas, you know, I went on long rants and diatribes in, like, previous books and everything. Like, I talked about how, you know, the war backdrop of High Druid didn't make any sense, or how in the Voyage of Juro Shannara, the darkness of the story kind of undermines its readability. You know, whereas there are those, you know, whereas, you know, I can talk about those here, there's not that much to talk about. At least not directly towards the series or anything, but more toward the overarching ideas. And it's not even criticism in this case, it's more just kind of observations I made while reading. You know? And of course, there's also, there's one other thing I guess it's worth noting, and that is, I also like the little idea of the hidden world, of the world hidden from the eyes of normal mortal men. You know, much in the same vein as the aforementioned Neverwhere, and also Harry Potter. You know, Harry Potter, which will be published a little bit after this particular book trilogy. You know, I feel like there's I just feel like there's a little appeal to the idea of a world. I think it speaks to a lot of us. There's an appeal to the world, to a world where, where like all our real world aspects are there. There are trains, and there's technology, and there's science, and there's religious faith and all that stuff. But there's also magic in the world that we can't see. You know, I think that appeals to all of us in some ways. You know, the escapism of that, the idea that, you know, maybe if we look in the right place, maybe one day we'll find that there's this cool, fantastical world that we could possibly become a part of one day. Probably not, but possibly. You know, and you know, I feel like that these books do that same thing. You know, of course, now that world's a big secret to the world at large. You know, there's not many people who know of magic and know of Knights of the Word and know of the Word and the Void and of demons and all that. But that little magic is still there, and I really like that aspect of it. And I think maybe that's a good part of the reason why I really enjoy it as well. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if it's a review or if it just bashed my desk. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little review / just discussion. I feel more as like a discussion than a review than anything. But yeah, when next we meet, it'll be time for the Genesis of Shannara. And right here I have Armageddon's Children, the first book. Like I said, this is we are in currently the part of the Terry Brooks lexicon, I guess, where we are, where we're in like his best book series, and this is the last of them. This is the last of the 4, because of course I said the Voyage of Juro Shannara, High Druid, the Word and the Void, and Genesis of Shannara are the best of the best for Terry Brooks. Especially in the Shannara series. I've never read The Magical Kingdom of Landover, by the way, so just pointing that out. But, yeah. Let's get to it. I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. I'm probably going to release another video after this talking about my current life situation. Things have changed a little bit, my choice, but I gotta talk about them a little bit, so we're going to do that. But that won't come out until after this video. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time for next book review, video game highlights. I don't know. Until next time, everybody.